So today is September 12th, 2025, and I just wanted to take some time to, as briefly as I possibly can, document some or all of the paranormal and spiritual experiences I've had throughout my life, because a lot of them are vivid memories. Most of them, the ones that I'm going to talk about here, are things that I still remember vividly. So I'll be talking about things going all the way back to when I was 2 years old, that I actually do have vivid memories of still. So going back to the very beginning, like I say, when I was probably right around 2 years old, are some of my oldest memories in general, and they're also my first paranormal memories or spiritual memories that I have. So when I was roughly about 2 years old, I have vivid memories of waking up in the middle of the night to find entities surrounding my bed. And at this time, these entities had a positive feeling to them. I wasn't actually afraid, but I would sit there and study what I was seeing for a little bit, at least in my 2-year-old mind. And the memories I have of them, I remembered them as rabbit people, like rabbits, like the animal rabbit, but they stood upright and they were somewhat transparent, like you could see through them. And they consisted of the colors of a lavender color, and then a darker burgundy color and a purplish color. And I can remember seeing 2 or 3 of them usually around my bed. And then around that time and a little bit later, from what I can remember, probably when I was 3 or 4, I would wake up in the middle of the night and actually get out of bed sometimes and look out my window, which looked out on my backyard, which was like a half acre of just grass and stuff. And I vividly remember seeing my backyard being populated by entities. In my mind back then, I related them to characters from the Muppets or Sesame Street, but they were very vibrantly colored, and like Muppets and stuff. They had exaggerated features, but in the realm of animals, and these brought positive feelings to me as well. It didn't bring fear to me as a child. That I was actually interested in these creatures, and probably a few years after that, maybe in the age range of 5 to 8, I would start to have, I guess, what I would consider out-of-body experiences when I was in bed. Consciously, I would wake up and I would feel large. It was very strange. It was an expansive feeling, but I would be above my body and in the corner of the room. My vision would be above my body and in the corner of the room, looking at my body, and also looking at other things in the room. And I just remember this expansive feeling. I could still feel, I don't know if I was feeling my body or what, but it was an expansive feeling. And also around this time, I was getting older, so I was putting more thoughts to some of these things I was seeing, but I began to see what I thought were leprechauns, especially when I was submerged in my bathtub, not my head underwater, but I was in my bathtub, and I started seeing what I considered back then leprechaun. They would actually walk along the dowel, or the rod that holds up the curtain of the bathtub. And that, as I guess, I wasn't afraid of it, but I found them to be quite interesting and maybe a little unsettling as I got older. But then, from the age of, I would say, my preteen to late teen years, from 11 to 18, I started to have like a really similar and cohesive experience of what most people, I guess, consider like the grays or the gray aliens. And this happened very often for many, like say probably about 6 or 7 years or more, consistently, where I would wake up every night when it would happen. It'd be, probably multiple nights a week for years. So I'd wake up it was always around like 2:30 or 3 a.m. And I'd start to have like these really vivid hallucinations, I would call them, of gray alien beings. I didn't see them as strongly as I saw the entities that I saw when I was younger. It seemed more like a vision more than like an actual like entity in the room. But I would see these visions, and it would bring me fear, to be honest. Like at that time, that's when I started to actually become afraid of what I was seeing, and what would actually, like, so I would lay in bed with these visions. They would just keep coming. It was almost like oppressive. Like these visions would just get strong, and of course my adrenaline and fear, would start pumping. And what would happen is I was like feeling isolated. I felt like it wasn't that I was frozen, but I felt like I shouldn't get out of bed. And what would get me past that was I would have to start thinking positive thoughts. Like I literally, like back then I didn't realize, I was just like thinking of things I liked, and then thinking of things like the white light. I was taught about the white light of Christ from my mom when I was young, and I would start to, as a child, like I would start to meditate on the white light, and eventually like my energy would like balance out, and those visions would go away. But there was one night, like towards my later teens, when I was having that happening. But there was one night where I woke up, and there were incredibly bright lights outside. Now, this felt real. I've had lucid dreams. I don't know if I'll touch on lucid dreams here in this talk, but this is more about actual waking experiences. It felt even more vivid than a lucid dream, as if I woke up and I saw these lights outside of the house, and I actually got out of bed and went into the backyard. So this time I got out of bed. When I went into the backyard, it was incredibly bright, and there was a metallic object in the backyard, probably like 10 to 12 feet or something. And I started getting these visions of the grays again. I can't say that I saw them walking, but like I saw the object in the backyard, and then I started getting these feelings of these visions of the grays. And they, in my mind, I guess like telepathically, that instance, they asked me, "Will you come with us? Will you enter our ship?" And without even thinking, I said no. And with me saying no, the like visions or like the telepathic messages like stopped, and I was able to go back into bed and go back to sleep. And so and that was like later in the situation. And probably, I might have been anywhere from like 14 to like 16 when that happened. And once I got closer to 18, I didn't have, from what I can remember, I didn't have as many vivid experiences. I was still interested in like spirituality and things. I was really into Edgar Cayce when I was a teenager, and things of that nature. So I was kind of like studying spirituality at that point, but it wasn't again until I was in my early 20s when I had another major experience. So in 2009, I was 23, and I was really into, like, any 23-year-old. I had actually gone back to, I was actually still in college. I graduated college when I was 26, and 23 was like the peak of my partying phase. And I had some really good friends, but that, I partied with, but I had another group of friends that was into camping and exploration and stuff, and they were sober. They didn't drink or anything. And, so when I wanted to have more like sober experiences, I hung out with them. And at one point, they invited me on a road trip out west. It was my first time going out west, west of Virginia. We went all the way to, I went all the way to San Francisco with them. And I slept under the stars in Death Valley, and I woke up surrounded by coyotes, actually. And my friends were sleeping in their tent, but I wanted to sleep under the stars. So, and these coyotes were surrounding me, and they, looked at me, watched me for a while, and positive vibes from them. And then eventually they left, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then so the next day, though, we ended up in Yosemite National Park, and it was beautiful. But my friend wanted to go hiking 4 miles off trail, so we go to the end of a trail, and then you hike 4 miles off that trail. And during the walk to that area, we saw a couple of bears relatively close to us. We saw actually a mama bear off the trail. When you get close, you can smell them. They really stink and stuff. But so we saw these bears, and we got to the campsite, and as the sun was setting, my friends went a few 100 yards or so away from campsite to cook, and I stayed with the campsite, and there was a slight clearing, maybe 50 feet, maybe 100 feet at the most, behind our camp. And as the sun was going down, I noticed that I thought something was falling on me, but it was coming at a sharp angle, these objects rocks were being thrown at me, and I looked over. It was coming from the opposite direction that my friends were cooking in, and I was like, okay, I was like, oh, they're throwing stuff at me, but I looked, and they were on the opposite side. And when I looked toward the side that was being thrown at, things were being thrown at me, I saw, and all I saw was a figure that was hairy, like a bear, but it was walking upright. And when I looked at it, it went from walking in the upright position to going down to the ground, basically, to get out of my vision, and then it disappeared. And I told my friends what I saw, and they were cool. They were like, I hope it was a bear and not a person. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I was like, it's just weird. It was throwing rocks at me. And later that night, we started hearing something hanging out around our campsite, and we had our food container about 30 feet away from the campsite. And anyways, what happened was the food container, we started hearing something drumming on the food container, because it was shaped like a barrel. But the funny thing was, it was drumming in a very rhythmic pattern, as if someone was playing the bongos or something, or tribal drums. It was really wild, and we were like, this is crazy, this rhythm. And that went on for hours. None of us slept that night. We were hearing this rhythmic drumming. And when we got up, you could tell the thing was pounded on and stuff. And we didn't see any other traces. We didn't find footprints or anything like that. But that experience stuck with me for quite a while. So then that was in 2009. And then in 2014, I was actually staying in North Carolina at the beach. There was a big group, and I was staying down I was the only one sleeping in the basement. It was a huge house. So I was sleeping in the basement of this beach house by myself. And I don't know what this was, but the windows the curtains started shaking violently, and I had the windows cracked, but not wide open. So the windows were shaking violently. It was really intense. And then I started hearing this drumming sound. It had almost a metal ting to it, like somebody was banging on a pot. And after a second of hearing that, it dawned on me that it was the exact same rhythm that I had heard in Yosemite. It was very eerie, and I got up, I went to where the sound was coming from, and when I went to where that sound was coming from, it moved to another part of the basement, and I followed it around a few times, and every time I got to where it was, it moved. So I was like, this is wild, and I just kind of gave up and like went to bed, and stayed there for another few nights, and there were some other paranormal experiences, but this was like the most major one, that week. So then about a year later in 2015, I had a huge rush of metaphysical experiences that came like crashing on me like crazy. So this is going to go to a different place, if you can follow me. I was hanging out at this crystal shop downtown because I've always been really interested in crystals, and I met the guy that worked at the shop. He didn't own it, but I met the guy that worked at the shop, and he was interested in crystals too, and I met him, and then he and I met two other people who were also interested in crystals, and the four of us became friends. Once we became friends, we all four actually started having spontaneous visions, both during the day and at night, of what I saw in the vision was four entities or beings on top of a very high mountain, and a giant wall of water would come towards these people. Now, I would have this like as a lucid vision. It wasn't even at night. I did have some at night too, but these were visions that would happen during the day. I had a lucid vision of this water crashing into a mountain, and these four individuals were at the top of the mountain, and almost like wearing robes, but purple, things of that nature. And we, after I had that vision a few times, I spoke to the other three, and the crazy thing was they were having the same vision. So after that, Dan and I, one of the guys, didn't mean to name names, but one of the people, we became close, and we were both the guy that worked at the crystal shop, and we started experimenting with crystals, and he presented this idea of using crystals to create stargates to other star systems. So I was like, this is pretty cool, let's try it. It was going to be like a thought experiment, and he had received these messages of like, this was his experience, but he was like, I was receiving these messages that if you use lithium quartz, and then these other combination of stones, you can connect to the Sirius star system. I can't remember if he said the Sirius star system or just a star in general. But anyways, he was like, okay, so Chris, you're going to go home tonight, set up these crystals. I'm going to go to my house tonight, set up these crystals. We're going to have the intention of opening a stargate with these crystals, a stargate to go to other star systems, whether it be mentally, spiritually, astral, whatever. And he was like, the next day we're going to meet up, and we're going to take notes on what happened. The next day we're going to meet up without talking to each other and compare our notes, see what happened. So I did that. I went home. I set up the crystal array, mainly with the lithium quartz and some grounding stones. And immediately I went to a room, and I saw the other guy in there, and he was in a bathtub shaking. He was in this bathtub. He wouldn't stop shaking. And I was standing there. And then the next thing I know, I see these beings with like a shield-shaped head. They're like a purple and a turquoise. There was like multiple, but they had like a diamond crystal that was like a purple color in the middle of their head, from what I remember. And next thing I know, I'm in this like desert-like environment, but it's not like any desert that I've ever been to or that I've seen on Earth, but it was like a desert. The sky was different. And then these beings were there, and I remember feeling like they were part crystal, part like plant. They were part plant, part crystal. And I was there, and it was a very positive feeling. They were providing positive feelings to me. So anyways, all that wrapped up, left the place after experiencing that for a while, was back in my home. My awareness was back in my home. The next day, I meet with my friend, and we share notes, and we had the exact same notes. We had drawn the same creatures. He did the Stargate in a bathtub because he felt like it would amplify his experience. So that's why I saw him in the tub shaking. So anyways, we compared notes, had the same thing. Subsequently, though, his boss found out that we had done that, and we had determined together through messages that we had contacted beings from the Sirius star system. That was also confirmed through our notes and stuff. We each had the same message. So anyways, his boss found out. She banned me from the shop because we were, doing things that she didn't approve of. And then my friend ended up getting fired, and we didn't really see each other much after that. And then, so then in 2000, probably like 16 or 17, I was at the river near where I live. I was with another friend, and we were feeding the seagulls. And I remember, and this is another experience. I remember looking up in the sky, and like very, very high, because I did a lot of like bird watching back then, especially bald eagles, because we had bald eagles in the area, and bald eagles would fly very high. I look up in the sky, and even higher than like the bald eagles would fly, I started seeing these 3 triangles that were white, and they were, from what my eye could tell, they were incredibly high up, like way above the clouds, because there was a couple clouds in the sky for reference at that time, and these 3 like triangles of light, I would call them, were almost like locked together, but they were separate. But the reason they were locked together because they were sitting there rotating on like an axis, and I sat there and watched them for many, many minutes, just like mesmerized, and the objects never deviated, never strayed from the place they were at, other than just rotating on, like around what would be the center. And eventually, after watching that for a while, it stopped, and I didn't see anything anymore. So that was really fascinating. That was probably 2017, 2018. And then I had a few years where, at least from what I remember, didn't see anything, like that again. It was very fascinating, always stuck with me. But then the most recent situation I had, I did have one other experience who was my friend back then, but became my wife, and this was more of like a ghost sort of experience, but we were walking, our friend lived in a place that was near Civil War battlefields, and anyways, we would visit her late at night, and you had to walk to her house through this huge field, and my wife and I were walking through this field, and this was probably in 2019, 2020. We both sensed something moving behind us, and after a little while, we turned around and looked, and about 30, 40 feet behind us, we saw some walking and then abruptly stop and stare at us, and it was in the shape of a man with like a cloak, but it was very dark, and like the more I stared at his face, like the more like diffuse like the features became. So it was almost like, no discernible features other than the shape. And then we started walking, we turned around and started walking again, we're like, oh, get out of here. And then it started walking, turned back around. So eventually, like, we walked far enough away for it to disappear. And when we got to my friend's house, we were like, has anybody else ever mentioned that? And she's like, yeah, that's like the ghost of like the woods around here. But it was the most vibrant, like the most, I guess, opaque ghost I'd ever seen. It had the presence of a human. So then, like, that was around 2019, 2020. So then, in 2024, my most recently experience, I was I live about on 10 acres. And we have a lake in the back, and I went out, and my wife had gone to meet up with a coworker. And it was around 8 p.m., like the sun was set. It was in May, like early May. I go out on the back, to something says, go outside right now, it's nice or whatever. So I go outside and I look over on the lake, and there's this like this bright orange, like burning. It looked like, like just like the lit part of a candle, like a flame, just like flickering there above the water. And it had no reflection on the water. It didn't reflect off the water. It just was itself lit up, which was crazy. Or it was interesting, anomalous. And I'm sitting there staring at this thing, and when I was staring at it, it gave me an emotional feeling. It was a positive feeling, but it almost felt like something was like communicating with me, and it's hard to describe unless you felt it, as if I was looking at something that was alive or something that wanted to talk to me. I was like, this is wild. So I'm staring at it, and over time I probably stared at it for 10 minutes altogether when all is said and done. And I noticed that it was almost like two-dimensional, like it didn't reflect off the water. And if you looked at it from another angle, it didn't necessarily change. You didn't see it from the other side. It was just like a flat, flickering, like bright orange, golden light. At that point, I began to try to track if there was anything that could be creating this light. I looked at what porch lights I had on. There's like one neighbor quite a bit ways behind us through the woods, and I was looking to see if there was anything they could possibly have. None of the angles or anything added up for this to be a reflection, not to mention the part that it didn't reflect off the water. It was just sitting on the water. And then I remember, so I'm looking at it, I'm like studying all the lights around me to make sure nothing's flickering, nothing's causing it. And as I'm looking at it, about 10 minutes in, it I would say disappears, but it's almost like it imploded on itself. It's like it just like sucked into itself and disappeared. And none of the other lighting in the area changed. No one had turned off a porch light. I was home alone anyway, and I was tracking all the lights at that time. No one way back in the neighbor. They're through the woods, and they were probably about like 100 yards lateral to that light, so it would have been difficult anyway. The part of the lake that the light was on was in front of like a dense part of the woods, where no lights were coming through anyway. But I just wanted to be sure of everything. But yeah, it's like it just like imploded in on itself and just vanished. And I will never forget what it looked like when it disappeared like that. And that was this year. That was actually this year, 2025 in May. I think I said 2024, but that was actually this year. So that brings us up to this day, and those are all the major ones. I've had like slight things here and there. You see this, you see that, you feel this or you feel that. But those, I think, are the highlights of like the major like spiritual / paranormal events that I've had in my life. And just wanted to record them while I was thinking about it in one place. So anyways, thank you for listening, whoever's listening, and one way or the other, I'm glad I was able to get some of this stuff out.